Hey guys, wanted to go over Alayne II here, and just because there was a lot of work done on this, and there's a lot of Easter eggs, and I thought some people would be interested in figuring or learning how this all came together and what little extras there are. So just getting into it. Um, so the first paragraph, obviously, most people are going to get for Alayne that this is paralleling Arya's death list. And this idea came from one of the submissions, and I thought it was so good that it needed to be in. And there's it made a lot of changes to what was originally planned. I think originally planned, um, Littlefinger was only going to be focused on maybe 3 or 4 knights. Definitely Sir Michael, Harry the Heir, John Redfort because of the White Raven. We needed to have that mix up, um, and maybe a couple others. But then once you sort of introduce the whole list, then it's like, well, that changes things. Now he's interested in gaming the entire thing, and so there's a lot of discussion on which people would be in there, because paralleling Arya's death list, you needed some variance. It couldn't just be Sir Andrew, Sir Michael, Sir Harry. So that the whole reason the Knight of Nine Stars is even in there is to give sort of variance to the mix up. Interestingly enough, uh, and I did a short video on this, but I haven't actually uploaded it yet about Arya's death list. But there's a lot of Arya thinks about disambiguation, which is really ridiculous. So like the Hound and the Tickler are always separated from everybody else, and then they're not in a sequence because you don't want people to think that the Hound is another name for one of the other people on the list. And so this list and the order and the meter of it was changed a million times. But this is why, if you notice, there's a Sir Andrew, Sir Michael, Sir John, period, the Knight of Nine Stars, and Sir Marwyn, and that's to kind of mimic the Tickler and the Hound. And they're separated by periods. It's very very silly, but nonetheless, this is the kind of detail that we go into when we go over these things. But there's so much time on this, and yes, Harry the Heir is there because he was originally Sir Harold, but we want some sort of variance, so he's Harry the Heir. But I think most people got that this was a parallel to Arya's death list, which is and then we go into the box, which, oh gosh, there's so much with regards to the geography of where people are sitting and what makes sense. Additionally, I think maybe George had a little bit of error in Alayne one, The Winds of Winter, because he talks about um, Alayne sitting at a place of honor. And in all the rest of Ice and Fire, a place of honor is a very specific place. It is the place to the right hand of the host. And so coming out of Alayne one, we were kind of like, oh, is she sitting at a place of honor? And it's like, well, a place of honor is really just for eating, and it's kind of the place to the right hand of the host. So there's just a lot of different changes on what Sansa was sitting on and where she was sitting, how far she was. Was she below other people? In the end, I just wanted her like on the outside of railings, like, and it being a complete artificial barrier. Like, this is ridiculous. These are the highborn. We put a railing, and to kind of parallel the fact that like the difference between highborn and everybody else is nothing. It's just an imagined barrier, and it was just going to be some stupid railing. But nonetheless, there was a lot of thought put into where people were sitting and how easy it could be for people to hear each other and see each other and grab hands and things like this. Um, then we get into more about where people are sitting, and obviously we're kind of making fun of Sweet Robin, because he's just this little kid and he's supposed to be this great lord, but being a keeper of the defender of the veil, but he's got snot from his nose because he's a little kid. And of course, his bear skin, his white cloak of bear skin, is something that appears in Alayne II, A Feast for Crows, when coming down the mountain. And we mentioned the his belly full of sweet milk, which we bring back in this episode in this chapter, and kind of throw water on all of the theorizing with regards to that. A lot of that theorizing I did, but we kind of just throw water on it. Um, and then we just kind of get some atmosphere and heraldry and things like this. Um, there was a lot of jousting in the original um, Alayne II, and then the chapter was way too long, and we had to bring it back, especially when now we dealing with the fates of all 8 knights rather than just a handful. Um, but of course, we have Sir Gillian Windman. Windman, he appears in, I think, a Game of Thrones. Tyrion sees his sigil. Not the character. I'm trying to remember, like, if Gillian is. I think we just made that name up. I might be misremembering that. Um, I know Luke Grafton is just made up out of nowhere. It doesn't mean anything. We just wanted a name. Um, but there's a lot of these names, and people are going to be wondering, like, are they all really important? And no, not really. Fine, yeah. So yeah, Gillian. I forget where I took Gillian from, or if somebody had put it in, but nonetheless, there's nothing special to these guys. It's just we needed people from the Vale, and they're kind of nobodies. The Garibald Hersey, is he also? I think he's also a nobody. Um, I don't think um, he's. If he is, he's not that significant. The um, can't even House Hersey. Yeah, nobody. He's just nobody. But Roland Wainwood is, of course, very important because um, uh, Littlefinger needs to get members of the Lord's Declarant and to win them over, and that's kind of the whole thing. Um, this onomatopoeia crack. George R. R. Martin actually uses very few onomatopoeias in his writing, and how you portray them is was kind of a mystery, and you have to go to like the Kingsmoot and the onomatopoeia of the horn going whoa, and so that's where I mean these little things we think about, like crack, all capitalized period, like not all capitalized exclamation point, all capitalized period. These little things like that. Go into the flashback. We do some food, some grossness. We tried to make this as gross as possible. That like Littlefinger is touching her with his little sticky hands covered in apple and cinnamon. Um, and this was sounds simple and then go on like it's single elimination, but you can't just say single elimination because that seems too modern. So we we say, oh, first to break 3 lances and unhorse an opponent would advance. I did a lot of research on jousts, and eventually you go through and you realize that George R. R. Martin is kind of inconsistent on how he portrays jousts. But one big thing is about like what does it mean to break a lance, and what counts as breaking a lance, like. And a lot of this has to do with, well, it depends on the tourney. So like is breaking a lance only mean you strike the shield and your lance breaks, or can you strike in another place and have it? And I think in this tourney you could strike anywhere and get a broken lance. George also varies on whether or not the people when they start out have their lance already coached in position, or whether they have their lance up and they drop it at the last moment. There's a difference between the Hedge Knight and Ice and Fire, for example, on that. So in the end, and he never really reveals whether people do do a pass and then stop and reset, or if they do a pass and then turn around and go. So a lot of these things we had to leave ambiguous, just because either George had a contradiction, or he himself like leaves it ambiguous. This was a little. So here we have this little thing about Littlefinger fixing the lists and how they would have accepted that. So like being determined by lot is actually something that was mentioned in the Hedge Knight on how the lists are determined. But then we need it to be fixed for Littlefinger. So he has Septon Vayan. I just picked that name out of the air because Van Pool. I'm just like, Septon Vayan. Might as well return that name. It doesn't mean anything other than the fact that they're just picking a name. But this was about, the pun here is that Septon Vayan indulged the Lord Protector with new and holier pairings. That's a joke about Catholicism and the indulgences. And then we go through, and this was a lot of work to get this going very fast, to try to explain everything, to take the time for every single person to establish the expectations, but try to go through it quickly because we have a lot of things to get through. But I think I really like how this turned out, the explanation of each person. And so a lot of it was about bringing back characters and about bringing back nicknames and things like that. So, for instance, Sam Stone. Sam Stone is Bronze master of arms, and he's mentioned in a feast for crows as coming with the Lord's Declarant. So it's like, we might as well throw in Sam Stone there. Marwyn Belmore, who is of course at the Gates of the Moon. He's of course going to be jousting. And he's probably pretty good. So, Sir Ding Dong is the nickname that Sir Marwyn Belmore got from Marillion. How Littlefinger found out about it, I don't know. I guess it went around and caught, but So, let's see. And we had to explain that he doesn't really care about Marwyn Belmore, but there's no way Marwyn Belmore is not going to win because he's just too good. And then we kind of go down to that. We have to get into the Red Forts because the Red Fort feud is kind of brought up earlier with the Lord's Declarant. So we kind of devised a reason that Peter would want Harlan Red Fort. I'm sorry, not Red Fort. Harlan. Shoot, I'm ahead of myself here. But yeah, we bring in John. We needed John because of the Raven. And so that was definitely just something planned from the beginning. Then we get into, there's only 6 Lords Declarant, but we have 8 spots. So we kind of need, and then John and Michael take up 2 spots. So we kind of need another person in there. So we decided to go with Bannerman for the Royces, which are listed with strong Sam Stone, the Coldwaters, the Tillettes, the Shetts. Originally this was going to be Other Shet, but then again, Other Shet was kind of described as not being very good physically, so we switched him to Dammon Shet, who is actually the character that comes with the Lord's Declarant. So he's only mentioned here, but he's there. Let's see, and then the Mystery Knights. So a lot of people had different Mystery Knight ideas, and I kind of felt that the best one, I liked this Orphan pun, and the idea was that God's grace is on the Greenblood at this fork, and so the idea is that the Blackfish is, River Run is on the fork as well of a river where things come together. So you can kind of say that God's grace is similar to the River Run, and he is an orphan now that he's been like he's lost his home is the idea. Um, and that plus just like all the jokes about Dornishman, like everybody thinking that he has to be a Dornishman like throws people off. So I really liked the idea of um, the Mystery Knight being Dornish identity. I thought God's Grace as like the River Run stand-in, and Orphan being kind of the orphans of the green blood, obviously, and then like Blackfish being an orphan, and then we kind of switch that orphan thing to Sweet Robin at the end, which um, and then we have we go into how on earth a Mystery Knight would be accepted, and it has to do with Donald Wainwood. Donald Wainwood. The reason Donald Wainwood is the real kind of super schemer of this chapter, and the reason is that if you logically think about who the Blackfish would go to and who the Blackfish is friends with and who his allies would be at in the Vale, like Donald Wainwood would probably be it, right? Donald Wainwood is now the Knight of the Gate, the Knight of the Bloody Gate. By the way, Gate and Gates get kind of confused a little bit because there's the Bloody Gate. So when people talk about the gate, they mean the Bloody Gate. But when they talk about the gates, they mean the gates of the moon. So Donald Wainwood is the Knight of the Gate, and he's probably knew the Blackfish for years, and so the idea is that Donald Wainwood being the new Knight of the Gate would help. That he would be at the gate, and the Blackfish would arrive at the Bloody Gate, and things would happen. And it just works out as well. Like Donald Wainwood's squire is Sandor Frey. Like so many things work perfectly with Donald Wainwood, and so he has to be like the schemer of the chapter. And so and then there's also later on people sort of said, shouldn't there be more betting in? And so we kind of merged in this idea that Mystery Knights are usually accepted because of like a betting schemes. Originally this whole explanation of everything was kind of just Littlefinger saying stuff, but we knew that we wanted Sansa to identify stuff more, and so by having him say like, look at this, what do you think, and then Sansa figures out each thing. When she looks at the groupings, she can figure out who Littlefinger wants to win, showing that she's pretty smart. Alistair Upcliffe, another just made up character. Simon Templeton, we needed the Knight of Nine Stars just because of he's a Lord Declarant, but also he's called the Knight of Nine Stars, and he switches up the meter of the death list. This is a funny thing is that the service to Robert being 3 years. It's a kind of a hidden line because this is kind of a Kingsguard. A lot of people had the idea that these people were going to be with Sweet Robin until his for life, but it's only actually 3 years, and so it was such a confusion among a lot of different people, a lot of entries, and a lot of the editors that we had to mention it a second time that no, this is to 3 years. It's in Alayne 1, The Winds of Winter, that it's only 3 years, but a lot of people were confused about it because it is like he's establishing a Kingsguard, so everybody their minds immediately go to that this is going to be another Kingsguard, so they're going to be like this, but it's actually only a 3 year tour. Then we get to the Harlans, Harlan and Eustace, and the Hunters. This idea that Harlan is eventually going to kill Eustace, and then he would be either a more valuable hostage because he's the next in line, or he would kill both Eustace and his the Lord, and then he would be the Lord, and they would have a valuable hostage. Let's see. And so then we get into Harry, and Harry's he's an upjumped squire, so we had to have him against who would be just as upjumped. And we were introduced in Alayne 1 to Wallace Wainwood, who, he needs to come back. He's a good character, and so he would be the one that Harry could actually perhaps beat. And then on the morrow, he'd face Sir Byron and Sir Shadrick, two of Sir Byron the Beautiful and Sir Shadrick the Mad Mouse. Um, by the way, Sir Byron's only ever called the Beautiful in the appendix, so we do add it here in the text that he's very beautiful, but that's something that's only in the appendix is his actual name. A lot of these characters have these added names that actually never really appear in the text itself. And then, of course, we talk about Lynn Corbray, who it would just be difficult for Lynn Corbray to not win. I mean, he's freaking Lynn Corbray, right? So, but the idea is that Lynn Corbray would throw things for Harry. So it just kind of made sense that you'd rely on Lynn Corbray to defeat everybody because he's so good, and then fall to Harry. Hersey and Sunderland, Lips and Upcliffe, Egan and Linderley. Egan is the house of the knight that Bronn kills during Tyrion's trial. Linderley, Linderley, his one of his sons is already a squire for squire or servant, I forget which, because he has a squire and a servant for Sweet Robin, so he's not really needed. But you'd think that a Linderley would be there. Waxley and Pryor, these are just kind of names that we've picked up around the Vale, and especially like the islands of the Bight. It becomes like I think Pryor is an island of the Bight, house on them, and they would be the worst at jousting, is the idea, which was established in the jousting thing with the Bight Islands is all from the Davos chapters. Brotherhood of the Winged Knights, greatest of swords, the noblest of men. Has there ever been such a roll of heroes? That is straight from the Sworn Sword, and we've got a lot of references to Dunk and Egg in this chapter. But that's Sir Eustace from the Sworn Sword talking about the great knights that were the great Blackfire knights. Has there ever been such a roll of heroes? And then this line, like my gift to you know their names, the saviors of Winterfell. It's actually tough to find the right word for originally it was like liberators of Winterfell, but George doesn't really use the word liberator. He uses it like once, and it's an Essos, and things like this, the conquerors of Winterfell. So it eventually came to saviors of Winterfell. Let's see, and then we get House Pryor. This is more atmosphere again. This was originally cut and then it kind of put back in. Sir Andrew beats Sir Skylar Stone, a hedge knight without device. A knight being without device is actually kind of a reference to Jory, because he has no device in the Hand's Tourney, and so I thought it was interesting to have a character who also just doesn't have device. And then I liked this. Doing my research on jousting, I learned that there was something called a mercy pass, where that if you signal for a mercy pass, the other person's not supposed to strike you down, but it's kind of like on your honor kind of thing. They can still just strike you down. You'll just look like a dick. And so the Knight of Nine Stars like knocks the guy down, despite Everett Moore signaling for a mercy pass. It's just House Morse, because we knew Mandan Moore, so we wanted to have Moore in there. So I just chose Everett as a random name. And then Lewis of Crab Cove kind of invented this guy because I liked the joke with the scary crab. This idea of the little lord talking about the knight with the arrows rode steadier. That's House Hunter is the knight with the arrows. That's kind of invoking Bran talking about Walder and Walder's jousting. Like, he kind of sits on the side, and he can't joust himself, but he just sits there and like makes observations about who is better. And so, like, having Sweet Robin kind of being like, "Oh yeah, no, that's the arrow rode steadier," as if he knows anything, But it's actually a Bran reference randomly in there. Um, and then yeah, we had Albar Royce is there. He just kind of has a cameo, so we thought his performance would make a deal would be a deal for the Royces. Alistair Upcliffe. I think we just chose Alistair because of Alistair. Uh, um, Shoot, Stannis's wife's house. These things where my brain just like falls. Florent, Alistair Florent. Um, so we just kind of chose the name Alistair for Upcliffe. Now, this is where we get into the more interesting stuff. So, Sir Xander the Hungry, we just kind of, you wanted something. The actual language on what um, people yell at, uh, what heralds yell an announcement at tourneys is not really consistent from story to story. I think in the Mystery Night they kind of say the person's name and then say "Come forth and prove your valor," but they don't really do that in the Hedge Knights, and so. Um, but a lot of people did when they did the reference, did their entries had different ways that the herald was announcing things. Some based on the Mystery Night. Um, but Gareth of House Sunderland. That's um, the Sunderlands are not so subtly named for for the role of heroes in in uh, in the Sworn Sword that Eustace talks about. So one of the roles of heroes is Gareth the Grey, and then one is Sir Aubrey Ambrose, and then of course Damon Blackfire. And so the Sunderlands are named after Gareth the Grey, Aubrey Ambrose, and Damon Blackfire. The rest of them, I mean, the rest of that role is Rob Rain, Gorman Peak, Byron Flowers, but there was already a Byron the Beautiful, Red Tusk, Fireball, Bittersteel. So there weren't that many choices. I could have called one Gorman, but uh, or Rob, but I figured Rob would um, be weird for Sansa, and Gorman plays a bigger role in the Mystery Night, so he might have been too obvious. But Gareth is definitely named after Gareth the Grey. Um, let's see, and then the the uh, the White Raven arrives, and so this text actually came. This is all kind of straight from a submission, um, discussing about like one night, thinking, oh, that was really great, but and making a fish joke at the Sisterman and saying, oh, it's time for you to flop back into the sea. Um, Originally, we actually went into their entire joust, but that had to be cut for time, because so it's just kind of like, well, once they said John beware, we kind of all know where it's going, so they're just like, it's done. He kept his shield too low, and so um, we didn't need to go into the whole thing on that. But there was some discussion of how much the crowd would be excited about the Raven and not. I think originally it was, oh, everybody was cheering the Raven, how exciting, because it's even presented as this splendid omen. But then really it's winter, like shouldn't they know? Like, so, and if this eventually gets changed to the polite applause of the seasons changing was all the crowd could muster. So we kind of went away from that. Um, we did a little reference. Poor Sir Shadrick. I know a lot of people like Sir Shadrick, and he doesn't play a very big role in this chapter at all. So we'll have to save him for later. But so we at least mention his mouse heads here in his joust, and Sir Byron the Beautiful being just an absolute monster jouster. Clearly, the best jouster there is Byron the Beautiful. He could have. I mean, he probably could even beat the Orphan. But Byron the Beautiful is just he does exactly as he's told. He's very clearly the best jouster at the tourney. He should win, but he he's perfect, but so and then Harry, and Wallace, which I think is really fun. The fact that they're both so bad at jousting that we kind of um, yeah. So the quarterlings of of uh, of Harold's shield come back, and of course, like in Alayne 1, it's mentioned like, oh, Sweet Robin's not going to like that. So we kind of needed to have the reaction of Sweet Robin and what it would do. Him having Aaron sigil on his shield, though he doesn't weirdly he doesn't have the Aaron sigil on anything else. He just had it painted on his shield. Um, the saluting of the lances, the dipping of lances, and him not even just kind of twitching. Um, uh, and then one of the editors actually has experience with stutters, and so a lot of the language for the stutters was changed to make it more accurate to what people would actually do in real life. We kind of have some people were wondering about the butterflies, bats. We might have gone too strong with the butterflies and bats because we mentioned them a lot, but there's this ongoing kind of reference to bats being in Elaine's stomach, or Elaine being compared to a bat. Um, I think there's maybe three over the course of the books, and then we put like three in this chapter by itself. At least maybe forget if it's two or three, but it's like it's pretty heavy with our bat reference. But this is of course like everything is heading towards Harrenhal. Like at the end of the chapter, they're going to liberate Harrenhal. We're heading. The bats are coming. Is the idea. And because the bats represent Harrenhal, and everything in Elaine's life is heading towards Harrenhal. I think you can, if you know kind of like my theory crafting and stuff like that. But even without it, with this chapter, you kind of know, okay, if Sweet Robin's king, and in the last chapter, she was saying she can't marry him because she's a bastard, and kings have the ability to legitimize, and she becomes the heir to Harrenhal. Once she's legitimized by King Sweet Robin. So, and it's funny because a lot of people are like, oh, Preston just made Sweet Robin king because he likes Sweet Robin. No, I made Sweet Robin king so he could legitimize Alayne. Like that's the only reason that Sweet Robin is king, is so he could legitimize Alayne. Like that's it. So, get our reference to Morgarth the Merry, Sweet Robin's other man. Um, and then them going by all of these different passes, 9 passes for the lances to break. Giving warning on not presenting shields. That was also like a little jousting reference, because you have to present your shield properly. Is one of the main rules of jousting. And then we go back in time, and we have her get to know. We have her get to know. Oh, well, we mentioned Sir Ossifer Lips here, and him breaking his ankle. It's funny, the ankle. We originally just had him break his ankle, and then the ankle coming back later in the speech of Donald Wainwood is actually quite nice, and references things later. Originally, he just broke his ankle because we needed somebody to get hurt to show how savage Sir Lynn is, and maybe to have a parallel to Dany breaking her ankle. But it fits nicely with Donald Wainwood's speech about how they're all Sir Ossifers. Aren't we all Sir Ossifer in the end? Yes. But yeah, we go back in time to how she meets Daemon Sunderland. And so then we find out about houses Sunderland, Pryor, and Elisham, which are, if you look on the map, there are these islands in the Bight, and that they're purposely invited here because they're going to be horrible at jousting, and that we want some jokes about the Bight and how they're just filled with fishermen and the smell of fish. More squishers than men, which I'm sure a lot of people got a kick out of. But why not throw in a squisher reference? So originally Alayne had a longer little story where she like walks by the where it's like she walks by the tent and she didn't hear anything, and she walks by a second time, and she walks by a third time, and like it was kind of playful, like she's not admitting that this is intentional, but it's very intentional that she's been walking by the tent 4 times because she wanted to meet, she fancies this Sunderland knight, and so she happens to walk by 4 times, and like, oh, on the fourth time she happened to run into the Sunderland knight. Just for time that was cut because it was like a whole paragraph of her like walking to and fro, that I thought was funny, but it cut for time. But the idea is that she very intentionally walked by this tent in order to try to meet the Sunderland boy because she fancies him. Um, and then this thing, I think some people might think that I only mentioned Daemon Targaryen, the Rogue Prince, because of House of the Dragon and stuff like that. But it's just, no, it's just like, it was there just as the joke that he's so clearly named after Daemon Blackfyre that for her to think he's named after Daemon Targaryen is hilarious. Like it's just so, like, his brother is named Gareth and his other brother is named Aubrey. And she's like, oh, you're named Daemon, like Daemon Targaryen, the Rogue Prince. No, no. But this is actually from, a lot of these things are from an entry. This text is actually all from a specific entry, and him being Daemon the Honorable. Uh, um, so this is a funny joke that was put in. But yeah, one of the entries had this whole text. And then Sir Lynn. Worrying about Sir Lynn, and then we get the Orphans of God's Grace, and the Orphan goes up against Sir Hector Harding. This was actually a longer fight originally. We had to cut it down. We actually see Sir Hector's squire, who is more relevant. Sir Hector is a invented character, but a very important invented character because it's rather clear that he is working with Donald Waynwood. And if you look at family trees and Frey Civil War and stuff like this, it's pretty clear why I invented Sir Hector Harding, and it's not too difficult to figure out who his squire is. But Sir Hector is on board with things for the same reason Sir Donald Waynwood is. They're second sons, and they have interesting squires. They have Frey squires. And so originally, like, his squire ran out with the quarterlings of Harding and Frey, but that was all cut for time. But yes, it's you can go through and figure it out, like who Sir Hector's squire is. But he's now only mentioned once. He like goes with Sir Donald's squire to help feed the orphan. But Sir Hector is an important character that we invented. And then the discussion of who the orphan is, which I thought I liked a lot because the fact that they're all just so focused on the fact that he must be Dornish, just because his name is Dornish, the orphan. So we obviously get this, like, Sir Byron the Beautiful says, oh, they think the snowflakes are tiny white demons to steal their young. It's why they keep south of Blackhaven. This is, of course, an Others reference, but the keeping south of Blackhaven is something that's going to come up in the John Con chapters, and I think it's going to come up in the next Hotah chapter. But it's important that we establish that Blackhaven is kind of the border. That's the Dornish marches. And then, we kind of have the Ironwood Knights missing. Originally, it kind of had like the whole list of knights being listed, like, oh, it was, but it's like, wait, why would this random person like know about anybody lower than somebody as important as like Anders Ironwood and his heir? So it's kind of just like, just mention Cletus, but obviously the nephew is Arch. And so then Oberyn's Martell's squire, he was the Orphan of God's Grace is really close to the Bastard of God's Grace, which is Daemon Sand's nickname. But so it kind of needed to lampshade that a little bit. Like, wouldn't somebody be like, wait a minute, isn't he Isn't he here? I thought he was from God's Grace, so maybe there's a Hellholt. And of course, confusing God's Grace and the Hellholt would be um, expected, considering that like Oberyn Martell is married to, or not married to, but his paramour is Alaria um, from Hellholt. So from the Hellholt. So, and then I think he's the ghost of Aaron Santigar. And it's more mainly just a shout out to poor Aaron Santigar. But I like this idea of the crushed skull underneath his head. Um, that he would be like an other coming back from the dead, with the crushed skull underneath his helm. And then we needed some more betting. So this is where we get kind of the I bet, and then like, oh, this is where we can shove in some betting. So this was added in later. And so let's see, the death list gets shorter. And yeah, here we have the squires of Donald Wadewood and Hector Harding taking a tray of food because they're actually the schemers. Syvass. So yeah, originally it just we kind of had this idea that I wanted to describe Syvass on Destier, but actually Syvass is was kind of just introduced to Dorne fairly recently, and it just makes it to King's Landing. So if it's made it to the Vale, it's just made it to the Vale. So we kind of had to have somebody bringing in the game from Gulltown. Well, who would have done that? Well, maybe Sir Oswell. He spent some time in the Free Cities. Plus, it gives Oswell a shout out. So that came in. I think one of the entries actually had Santa learning how to play Syvass at the beginning, as a kind of parallel to her character, like learning to play the Game of Thrones. That that idea might be put in the next Alayne chapter, that she's playing Syvass a bunch. But yeah, but that's where that is. It's it's a little weird that's there, but yeah, this idea that Oswald brought this game up. This was all, yeah, a lot of this was trimmed down, but yeah. Lyman Linderley was mentioned in Alayne 1, so he's back here. Gareth Sunderland is our invented one of the brother is not invented, but yes, one of the brothers. And then we have the game of hide and seek, which there was a great entry that had the game of hide and seek. But then later people are like, wait a minute, hide and seek doesn't sound very Westeros. What game could it be? Well, there's a game called Rats and Cats. So it eventually hide and seek became Rats and Cats, which is kind of fun. We have no idea what Rats and Cats actually is, but why can't it be hide and seek, right? And then of course we get the arriving of Coleman and Williman. For those that don't know, Williman is Williman Frey. He's never mentioned as a Frey, just like Sandor is never mentioned as a Frey, or Hector Harding's squire is never mentioned as a Frey. There is this secret underlying thing that there's all these Freys lurking about, and Donald Wadewood talks about this whole Frey thing, but we're never specifically told that all these Freys are about. But if you read the appendices, or if you're you know who these characters are, like, oh, Willem and Frey, so this idea, Alayne did not move, still as stone. As still as stone is of course a reference to Arya. I think originally it was still as her surname, and that just sounded awkward. So still as stone it became, which is an Arya reference. But yes, listening to the Maesters talk, and so we kind of just throw some water on the sweet sleep stuff. Mummer's wine, which is the idea that Coleman wasn't like Coleman. He's not going to murder a little boy, right? like Littlefinger and Alayne telling him to keep giving him sweet sleep all day long. Like, if he did that, he would be really incompetent as a maester. And we kind of already established that Coleman is a good maester, because Coleman nearly saved Jon Arryn's life, and so he was actually sent away by Pycelle. So the idea that Coleman would be such a bad maester as to keep feeding Sweet Robin Sweet Sleep just on like the orders of Littlefinger or Alayne was a bit weird. So, and keep in mind, I understand that's George R. R. Martin, but it'd just be a bit weird. Like he would know the dangers of Sweet Sleep, and he couldn't murder a little boy like that. Like why would Mr. Coleman do that? So all the theorizing with like, oh, maybe Sweet Robin has like super constitution or something like that. Like, no, let's just have it that he's not actually getting the sweet sleep, but he's been given placebo, mother's wine. And so Maester Williman's like, oh yeah, okay. Maester, Archmaester Ebros believes that it's all in your head. So what of the White Raven? So originally, this is all of this is from all this conversation is originally from an entry, but we kind of like made a few things more of a mystery. Like before, they're clearly talking about dragons, and we eventually just over time the mention of dragons kind of disappear. Like it used to be like, oh, Alayne is like all shocked, like dragons, what? And then those are taken away, and then you're like, well, where does it even need to have dragons mentioned? Let's have her be confused. So they're talking about the dragons. Good news. The timing thing is actually something I put a lot of thought into, and it may be too soon, but because originally I think it was like I even pushed it back. I think like where the dragons, if the dragons were loosed or not, or maybe they had this, but I said the Marinese two are chained by the King of Marine, which means that this news is from after Daenerys uh, leaves, but before Quentin releases the dragons, and so which is actually relatively recent. So I think it kind of shows that the Maesters have messengers in the free cities to get them information faster than even the even the king would get. Even the small council would get, because this is pretty recent news. That two are chained by the king, and that Daenerys is missing. Um, so especially when you consider like just when this is, it's like before it's the first day of winter. Um, and then they know about Aegon, and then we kind of mentioned the blood, and we mentioned Nettles. Um, I suppose that's another mention to Princess and the Queen. I figured give Kedri a shout out. Um, and then we thought, oh, in Old Town, this was kind of just some jokes. Like if everything is going to be they're going to confusing things, we're gonna add Marwyn, and that way like Alayne is just not going to know what's going on. Like why are they talking about Marwyn? Like Sir Marwyn Belmore? Like that's just kind of the funny stuff. So um this okay. Next, she has breakfast with Sweet Robin, and he's eating eggs soft boiled. If you remember in Alayne 1, he has a freak out and it's like, I want bacon and eggs, and she's like, oh, we can have bacon and eggs and melon and all sorts of stuff. And so I was like, oh, let's make that like mean something more. Let's make it mean like that he misses his mom, and this is kind of some foreshadowing of him missing his mom, and tying in the egg incident from Alayne 1, A Feast for Crows. And then we played around with a lot with like what Sansa would be thinking about Mummer's Wine, White's Raven Message, Blood. And then of course like just Alayne just not getting it is just kind of there for funny, like just for laughs. Like, Sweet Robin, what do you know about Nettles and Daenerys? And they're like, whoa, well, Nettles was this bastard girl, and she ruled as a queen, and Daenerys was a Dornish princess. Oh, right, And then that becomes an Aegon, a Dornish princess, a warning for Sir Jon. Like Aegon, Dornish princess. Like we're clearly here with Aegon, Arianne, Jon Con, like as this like funny little joke, and Aegon, a Dornish princess, a warning for Sir Jon. So And it all relates to Sir Marwyn Bellamore and and Old Town and the Dornish Mystery Night because they're talking about Dorne. So she's like, it must relate to the Dornish Mystery Night. So it's just ridiculous how like off she is, which I think is hilarious. You know, it's the next day she's like, oh, we need to talk about Sir Marwyn and Sir John and the Dornishmen. And so like based on that, like, you know, I know it's a bit of a cliche when people are like, "Oh, we need to talk about something," and then the person gets cut off. You know, this is like such a cliche before they can explain. But really, she comes forward with like people that sound like this sounds like the tournament. Like, oh, Sir Marwyn didn't win, Sir John didn't win, and the Dornishman is a problem. Like, it sounds exactly like we're talking about the tourney, but in fact, she was talking about stuff that was completely different. Um, and so Littlefinger dismisses it and he's like, "Oh, all of our plans are intact." Um, so then, yeah, we mentioned Sir Morgarth, who drops, who is Littlefinger's man, and so he just hops off his horse. This is one of the entries had Sir Morgoth pretty much just jumping off his horse and it kind of being obvious. And then Maya Stone. So a lot of people were wondering if Maya Stone if this is really in her character and everything. And the Maya Stone Michael Redfort thing has been built up since a Game of Thrones and Catelyn coming to the Vale. She talks to Maya Stone, and Maya Stone goes on and on about Michael Redfort and how they're in love and things like that. And it's ridiculous, right? But so there's kind of this little joke that like, okay, if she's, you know, she's getting parade, and also there's, you know, introduced the idea that Lothar Brun is fancies her too, and he, you know, Miranda Royce specifically asks like, oh no, I'm sorry. Alayne specifically asks like, oh, I wonder if he likes her in leathers or in silk or whatever. And so the idea is that like Miranda dismisses that, where she's just like, he's a man, he likes her probably naked. But in fact, she's like, she uses that knowledge and is like, huh, Lothar Brun likes Maya Stone, eh? Well, let's cause him to get off his game. So Miranda Royce has Maya Stone, who, keep in mind, Maya Stone is her servant, um, come in with this like deep cut bodice to show off her breasts. You know, she doesn't have huge breasts, but she's still got this deep cut thing, and so she's all in makeup and everything, and that's gonna cause Lothar Brun like to be like, what's going on? Um, and so also, and if she kind of looks like that, she's all made up. Afterwards, like when she runs to Michael Redfort, he's also going to be like, "Whoa, you're looking hot today." So you know, it's this dual purpose for Miranda dressing up Maya Stone, which I thought was a fun little thing. So Lothar Bruin, the Apple Eater. The Apple Eater is, of course, his nickname that he got after the Blackwater for the Fossways, for killing a Fossway and capturing another. So they called him the Apple Eater. But yeah, the idea, and of course these were all longer jousts, but I think we shortened them up and it was better. And so the Orphan just, you know, even though Bruin's a pretty good jouster, the Orphan just handily takes care of him. Let's see, Waxley, Knight of Nines. Then we just kind of have we couldn't go into like all of these jousts, so we started shortening it up and just say, oh, her father's scheme sprung a leak, and it was just they started losing, you know, and we couldn't go into every single one. It would just take forever. And then Harry goes against Byron the Beautiful, who is just, you know, Byron the Beautiful is just incredible at jousting, and he can make Harry like move his shield and everything and make Harry a better jouster than he was. And then we have Sir Lynn of Heir to Heart's Home. He's actually not going to be. The editors we talked about this a little bit. He's still the heir, though he's not going to be the heir for much longer. But so it's kind of a little dig. But and then this idea that the saddle has been sabotaged by Miranda, so that Sir Lin falls off. We were looking for. There's all these little things where it's like looking for like armor and jousting terms and stuff like this. So he grabs a the crenette, like the crenette. Like I think in the original entry, he grasped for the mount's mane, and I was like, oh no, let's find something. Oh, a crenette, yes. um. So of course, Sir Lin is just going to be so angry about that, because now he's not going to get his money from either Littlefinger or Bronzeon Royce. And so now they're down to Sir Michael and Sir Roland and Harry the Heir. And then we get to the Ravens. Yeah, we messed up here where we called Kevin Lannister the Hand of the King. He's actually the regent. But so if we redo this, we'll have to change that. But some people are like, yeah, it's just news from a Raven. People get these sorts of things all like wrong. And it's true. It's true. George R. Martin himself gets stuff like that wrong all the time. But yeah, that's But this is the kind of the first time we have news of what's going on in King's Landing post epilogue. And so what would happen post epilogue? If Cersei is still on trial, then you'd think before they can assign a new regent that they would have Mace Tyrell kind of ruling as hand. I would think. I mean, it would take 2 weeks. Like even if you assign like a Lannister from Casterly Rock to come, it's going to take a couple of weeks for them to get to King's Landing. So you kind of have this brief period of time. But Mace Tyrell is kind of dealing with war, so it doesn't even matter. And then we kind of just needed to bring the tapestries in, look at the tapestries and the bastard mule girl. There's some discussion of like how known was it that Maya Stone was Robert's bastard, because Robert never formally declared it, but Maddie, the gossip servant, knows about it. So the idea is that everybody kind of knows the gossip, that. And so this is it, Bonifer Hasty. What's great about Bonifer Hasty's rebellion, declaring for Aegon, is that there's 2 separate reasons why he could possibly be declaring for Aegon. One is that he was in love with Rhaegar's mother, and therefore he would support like Aegon as the child of Rhaegar. And then the other is that the Hasties were possibly Blackfyre supporters, and we know this just because the Hasty sigil shows up in the Mystery Night, and so it's left ambiguous which reason it is. Is it because he's in love with Rhaegar's mom, or is it because of the Blackfyre things? So we're not sure. But again, like, what if Aegon, she thought, what if Sir John and the Dornish Princess? This is again like just referencing that other story. Aegon, Arion Martell, John Connington as this joke being put in there, that for completely other reasons, because when she says Dornish Princess, she's thinking about Daenerys, the Dornish Princess, and Sir John, she's thinking about Sir John Redfort. But it's just funny. It's funny that all the names kind of relate, right? And of course, everybody talking about Littlefinger and what they would do if he lost his title. Made up characters: Mads Malcolm. He's nobody. But then we get into the Frey Civil War stuff and the logic on like why you'd want to support, why you'd want to go in there. And in the end, the logic doesn't really matter, because people, this was actually a longer conversation, and people are like poking holes in Sir Donald's like logic, like, because for a while he's like, I think in an original draft he's saying that Sandor Frey, his squire, is actually the heir to Derry, and everybody's like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. And he's like, it doesn't matter, okay? Like, and it's true that at this point it doesn't matter. But in the end, we kind of go, the reason they go in is that they're all second sons and hedge knights, and they don't have lands of their own. And they didn't get the chance to win lands in the War of the Five Kings like other people, and so now's their chance to go in and win lands, because otherwise they're just gonna eventually they're gonna lose their abilities to fight, and they have no place to live, and they'll be living in poverty. So we get into the Frey Civil War kind of stuff. That they have this motivation. Their motivation. I mean, Donald Wainwood's motivation is more than this. I mean, a lot of the people wanted to go into the War of the Five Kings and fight for Robb, probably for that same reason, that they want to win lands as second sons. But he's doing this as a favor as well to the Blackfish. But he wins over everybody with the unwed daughters, the widows, the orphan maids. Like they're gonna marry in and have places to live, and it's gonna be fantastic. And we see that, like, of course, like Hector Harding is like smiling and things like that. So, and then we have Alayne like going off. We actually there's a lot of discussion of the privy and like dresses, and how would we get this. So like how complicated was Elaine's dress? Like, would she need help? Did Maddie need to be with her? But I was like, well, I kind of wanted like somebody to alert Sweet Robin, and it's like, well, could Sweet Robin and Lothar Bruin be just keeping an eye on her anyway? It's like, well, let's keep another reason, that like the reason that they come to save her is because Maddie alerted people that she was taken off somewhere. It's a little bit, it's a little bit weird that Lothar Bruin saves her a second time. So I did lampshade it a little bit, but I think it works pretty well, because we need to make Harry more of a villain before he dies. And of course, will you show me your chambers is a reference to Alayne I, where she offers to show him to his chambers, and then show me that beard is a reference to the pointy beard comment that she makes, where he's like, oh, you thought I had a pointy beard. I think we get her reminding her of her first kiss, a dim memory. She actually doesn't, her dim memory, that's of to the Hound, but she actually never kisses the Hound, but she thinks she's kissed the Hound. So it's kind of a weird memory. So she's saved, let her be cousin. She goes to her room, and this is the only mention of Sansa this is the only time Sansa emerges as a character. Miranda later says, oh, Sansa, but she emerges here. Sansa wept and thought of Winterfell. Alayne decided it had never happened. So, but yeah, this is the lampshade. Lothar saved me a second time is a lampshade of the fact that he saves her from Marillion, and then he saves her from Harry. And so this kind of worked out well, because it was the story was getting long, and we needed to just cut jousts, cut tilts, and so having her oversleep and missing like nearly the whole third day was an important thing. So just for space, like we couldn't have that much jousting, and so she wakes up late. And she has a good reason to wake up late, So, and so she wakes up late, and she's missed the fact that Michael has already lost because he slept with Maya Stone last night. Aubrey Sunderland, Rod cast him far from the skiff. Get our little fish jokes in there, and then we can just like summarize what happened very quickly, because she overslept. Yeah, Lord Nestor calling back the Dornishmen and his sort of like thoughts on the War of the Five Kings. Like, if only the Dornish had performed better, like they would have won the war. And so then we have Randa. And Randa's this is very long, but Randa's conversation was also trimmed down. She was much more playful and really going into everything, but rightfully so. People said, it's a bit much. She's She doesn't have her own like YouTube channel with theories. Come on, let's cut it back. It's like, okay, so we kept back we have her figuring out the age thing because Alayne claims she's 4 and 10. And Alayne II, A Feast for Crows, she decides that Alayne is a year older than Sansa. But in fact, that causes problems. And then of course the shoe incident, which I felt had to come back. So we had to talk about these pairs. This was a much longer paragraph. It was much more gruesome, but it's just like hard describing this like gruesome like situation of what was left. But the 3 shoes, half again 2, 1 shy of 4. I made the count twice, then thrice. I just thought Miranda would just be very playful, and vicious at the same time. But though she gives her mercy. Still as Stone mentions the Eddard's bastard. Originally, we had her mentioning like the fact that you're like supposed to be part of the faith, but you didn't care that there was a new High Septon. But just for time, like we just had to cut stuff back. And then her revealing that all this stuff that happened at the tourney was her, like, you know, Lynn's saddle and Maya, of course, you know, and so her plan comes into focus. She just wants to take, all she needs to do is to steal their plan, because essentially Littlefinger stole Nestor Royce's plan. Nestor Royce's plan was always to marry. Nestor Royce was ruling the Vale in Jon Arryn's stead for Jon Arryn's entire handship. So he really felt that the Vale was his. And so when Jon Arryn died, he was the main suitor. There were some other suitors, but he was the main suitor of Lysa. And so when Littlefinger comes in and like steals the Vale from him and then gives him the Gates of the Moon as like lordship, that's kind of, you know, some people are really convinced by him getting tears in his eyes and being like, I earned this. It's like, well, he probably thinks he earned a lot more, you know, like his whole thing was to either marry, because again, like Miranda is also supposed to marry Harry the Heir. Littlefinger came in and stole their plan. Their plan was to marry Lysa and to marry Miranda to Harry the Heir. That was the Royce's plan, the lesser Royce's plan. And so the fact that Littlefinger comes in and steals their plan, you know, having Miranda come back and steal Sansa's plan is kind of the fitting like tit for tat, you know, like, oh, I just need to get rid of Sansa, and that Harry will be a winged knight, and it'll be a betrothal through Lady Anya. We'll just do the same thing. And so she does it, you know, like Miranda's plan is pretty great. She one-ups him. It's just, you know, it's just in the end, like Donald Waynwood interferes with everything. If it's not for Donald Waynwood, Miranda would have had everything. Well, I guess, you know, Harry dies. That's kind of a big problem. But had Harry not died. And then we kind of have Alayne just being shocked, and there's a lot of time spent adding, you know, Elaine's reactions to everything and on this. But then of course the ambiguity of whether, so Daemon and Harry go at it, and the ambiguity of whether Sweet Robin has anything to do with it, with fly, 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 and then Daemon getting the splinter in his crotch and dying, which originally I was confused and thought that this was how Humphrey Hardying died, but it's actually how the other Humphrey dies, and so I kind of like make that joke later too, that Humphrey Beesbury is the one that died that way, and that some of these knights make the same like error. But Widowhood will become you, of course, like back to the end of Storm of Swords. And then we've got like his ancestors is of course like mentioning the Hedge Knight. And then we get to Donald Waynwood's squire. Donald Winwood's squire, which is of course like um, overcoat quartered broken wheel of Waynwood and Twin Towers. Like of course it's Sandor Frey. Um, and so what's great here is with the song not only like there's a lot going on here. One, like obviously the Hound requests that Sansa sing for him, and so that we have a twist around where Sansa is asking Sandor to sing for her. But of course, it's just also like a big reveal. Like this is Waynwood's motivation. Like the real motivation on thing and what he's scheming to do has to do with the fact that he has a squire that's a Frey, and his um, it's a lot of scheming. So it's kind of a reveal that at this point that oh, like there's a reason why Donald Waynwood is so concerned with the Freys and the Riverlands, and why Hector Harding is concerned with the Freys and the Riverlands, and why the Hunters are concerned with the Freys and the Riverlands. And you have to go to the appendix and be like, wait, who is Sandor? Who is Sandor? Who is Williman? Who is Brian? Uh, so the like the song, yes, my lady, and of course, some people may have got this, but this is the song itself is a reference to where Sandor comes from. The name Sandor comes from a George R. R. Martin story called When Morning Comes Mistfall. So the song is Sandor of the Mist. We get a little reference to Marillion, and then the planet in When Morning Comes Mistfall is called New Refuge, which is why we have the song being "A boy wanders the mist of morn, for refuge she does roam, or lonely hills poor Sandor climbs, mayhaps for a new home." And this idea as well, like mayhaps for a new home. One, like you get the mayhaps because it's Frey, but like the new home is this idea that at this point, like Winterfell is lost to Sansa, right? Like her plan for Winterfell are gone. They're shattered. And now the new home enters, and the new home of Harrenhal, and the focus of where the story is going like comes in. And so a lot of thought was put into this little song here. And then we just for time, like we just couldn't have a melee. Like it's just too much stuff going on. Like I know people wanted this to be like more than like 2 chapters or something, but it's just we got to get Sansa going. We can't have her lingering around. So we canceled the melee. Originally, Sir Daemon did make it in the Brotherhood of Winged Knights, but I think people are like, wait a minute, would Littlefinger really allow that to happen? Would Nestor Royce? It seems a little weird. And you're like, yeah, you're right. So, and plus back down to 7, that's the holy number. So it's just kind of makes sense here. And then if it's the holy number, then it's also kind of curious that there's a stranger among, because the mystery knight, and so it all kind of fits nicely together. Once Daemon is kicked out, and everything going back down to 7. And so we get a few just references: Ben Coldwater, Andrew Tillett, Shadwick the Mad Mouse, Morgoth the Merry, Lynn Corbray, Lady Forlorn, Ossifer Lips. Sir Owen is the random knight that was fighting Sir Lynn in the previous chapter. So I felt he needed a cameo. And then we get the swearing. And we've never had a knight swearing or anything like this. For the best example we have is Brienne. And so a lot of this kind of stuff is like keep your counsel and give your life for his is actually from Brienne. And originally she says things like swear by my sword, and knights swear by their sword. But then one of the editors pointed out, like, wait a minute, like they were just asked to swear in the names of these gods, and then they switch it to swear by the sword. Oh, okay, yeah, that seems really, really bad. Do you swear by the gods? No, I swear by my sword. Oh, okay, so it's just I swear. And so in the end, we get the Winged Knights. Sir Gareth and Sir Aubrey, obviously, because they're the sistermen. We need to have them win. Lyman Linderley is just there because he was referenced last chapter. Why not? Alistair Upcliffe was also just kind of random earlier. Sansa mentioned him, so why not? And then Targon the Half Wild. Um, Targon may also be a Frey. We haven't chosen. We haven't. He may be another lurking Frey. So it's not settled yet. But there's a possibility. That he's Aegon Bloodborne. Um, so we'll see. We'll see if it fits. And then the God's Grace is the unmasking of the Mystery Knight. So I kind of knew that whether or not this chapter would work comes down to two things. It comes down to the speech of Donald Wainwood, and it comes down to this kind of final scene of the unmasking and whether or not this would be a good chapter. So a lot of time is spent on this and what happens with Sweet Robin. And so what I like about the ending is that there's a lot of ambiguity on what exactly brings everybody over. And maybe it's a different thing for different people. But the idea that, this whole time we've been thinking about Sansa's feelings and Littlefinger's feelings, and so little time is actually given to Sweet Robin's feelings, And so in the end, like how would he react to the Blackfish being there, and it just being this like overwhelmingly emotional moment for him, and him not being able to like handle it. And of course, like the expectation, and it's established at the very beginning that they didn't want him to have a spell in front of everyone in the Vale. But the idea is that what actually saves Littlefinger is exactly that, him having a spell of sorts, even though it says it was no spell. It kind of is a spell, it's like what really like saves them is him crying and having this like this breakdown in front of everybody, in order to sort of put people in the mode that they all are going to become Lysas. They're all going to become Alaynes. Like, that we weren't thinking about. Everybody thinks it's this spoiled little boy. He's such an annoying little. And in the end, it's like, oh wait, he's like an 8-year-old boy who lost his mom, and who everybody is just waiting for him to die, and no one cares about him. And like to have all of that come out at once. This was a very important scene to me. I thought it was just, it all comes down to this, and if this didn't work, nothing would work about the chapter. And so the Cries of the Orphan was there. Originally, I think when it was originally written, like the Blackfish is like socially awkward, where he's just like, they're there, like doesn't really know what to do. So there's a little, he strokes his hair at the end, so it's a little less of that, but it's very clear that Brynden also doesn't give a fuck about Sweet Robin, Well, which is strange because he should, right? Family, duty, honor. But he's so. I think what I'm hinting at here is that Brynden is so focused on like taking Riverrun that he's not the best character, even though he's supposed to be focused on his family. Like he is so focused on retaking Riverrun that he's gonna put Sweet Robin and everybody else in danger for his little mission. So I'm not putting the Blackfish in a very good light in this, actually, because in the end, like Sweet Robin is still everybody's pawn. He's just this pawn for everybody's, like, so they can win lands and things like this. And it is emotional. Maybe some people standing there are like pitying Sweet Robin, but that's this idea. Are they doing these things because they love Sweet Robin, or are they doing these things and they pity him, or are they doing these things because they see Sweet Robin as a pawn, as an opportunity? And definitely, like when you have things like Maester Williman whispering in Gilwood Hunter's ear, like Maester Williman is a Frey, like Sir Donald has a Frey squire, Sir Hector Harding has a Frey squire. So, it's very intentional that these are the first people that Sir Brynden wants Riverrun back from the phrase. You know, like it's very clear. Like once you go through these people and figure out who they are, what the plan is. You know, only later do you kind of get, and even like you look at the first people, right? The first people are Sir Donald Waynwood, Maester Wellman convincing Hunter, and then Hector Harding expanding it even to King of the Trident, and then Lyn Corbray, which you're like, come on, who does Lyn Corbray care about? Lyn Corbray cares about Lord Lyn Corbray. You know, he had this agreement that he was going to get some money from either Littlefinger or Bronzion, and he blew it. He blew it because of Miranda Royce's saddle thing, and so now he needs some money. He needs some lands because he's got nothing. And so Lyn Corbray being the next one, and him putting his Valyrian steel blade down. Then we get into some randoms, you know. Eustace Hunter because his brother, Gregor Egan and Sir Luke Grafton, you know, they're just you know, 3 Sunderland brothers, you know, and the rest of the Winged Knights. And, you know, then we get into like the general people, and then some people that you wouldn't necessarily expect, you know, all the rest of the Waynwoods, Harlan Hunter, Samwell Stone. You know, Samwell Stone is purposely there as like, oh my gosh, like considering that he is Bronzion's man, that's a pretty big deal. And then the Lords Grafton and Belmore, and then Littlefinger getting that big smile. He's like, oh, he was saved. He was saved. Some criticism I got from people were like, shouldn't Littlefinger always be in control? And I was like, there's a couple moments where he's not always in control. Like, you know, when he first observes Sansa's hair, he goes off and is nuts. He gets really angry at Tyrion for like screwing up his betrothal talk in A Clash of Kings. Littlefinger isn't always on top, so this is one where he lucks out. And then their little king, which you know, that had to end that way with that line, just because of her little lord, and now it's their little king. Like everyone, the idea is that everyone has been Lysa-fied, or everybody is possessing their new little pawn. So it's like you can read this line 2 different ways, and yeah. So that's it. All right, thank you for listening to this. Oh, this went on a long time. All right, well, that's the explanation of the chapter. I'll talk to you guys soon.